Even this socket does not want to rotate perfectly straight. You can really see that angle. Oh, oops. I've just got to not rush and not panic, and we'll be okay. Welcome back to Adventure Gear TV. I recently had the Journeys Off-Road 3.5-inch lift kit installed on my 2015 all-wheel drive Toyota Sienna. And over the last 1,000 miles or so that I've had this, I've noticed that there is just a slight shimmy, maybe a vibration coming from the drivetrain, which is purely a symptom from installing that lift kit. And what is going on, I believe, is that my drive shaft from the engine to the center carrier bearing to the rear carrier bearing is straight. Once you get to this carrier bearing and then back to the differential, there's a 3-inch drop. And I believe that that difference is what is causing the minor vibration that I'm getting on acceleration. And you can see in this shot where I have my camera lined up perfectly flat with the horizon, the angle between the drive shaft from the front carrier bearing to the differential. And here where the drive shaft is leaving the carrier bearing, you can really see that angle going down. Now, according to the company that claims to have the solution for this problem, that's a 7-degree angle between that bearing and the differential, and I've got a kit that just might correct the problem. So in my van, I have the kit and all the tools that I need to modify that drive shaft to straighten it out. In this box, I have the 4 bolts, 2 longer ones, 2 shorter ones, 2 shorter bushings, 2 longer bushings. And by the way, this is not sponsored. This is not given to me product or review. This is something that I had a little bit of interest in, and I wanted to try to correct this problem. I plan to install this and see, does the buttometer tell me whether or not I've reduced some of that vibration. And for this job, I only really need 2 tools. I have my torque wrench so I can set that 19 Newton meters of torque for when I reinstall the bolts. And then I wanted to show you guys or describe to you a little bit of the vibration sensation and how that works using my 14mm socket, which is required for this install. All right, so what is happening, I believe anyway, is the drive shaft should be straight like this, but when I'm using it, or now that I've had that lift kit installed, lowered that rear differential, and then when you go to turn it, you can see that even this socket does not want to rotate perfectly straight. And while folks have had these Journeys off-road kits installed for years, in fact, I think up to 2 decades now they've been making these kits, nobody has really had problems. However, around every 100,000 miles, they do replace the drive shaft, and a lot of times they have a little bit of problems with the CV axles. I want to install those spacers and see if I can eliminate some of that vibration that I'm getting from the drive shaft. So the real issue is that as much as possible, when you have a drive shaft, the U-joints are in their happy place when they are as straight as possible. And so if I can put those U-joints back in their happy place, it might put me back in my happy place when I'm driving my Sienna. In my research for this problem, I did call Journeys Off-Road, and the gentleman that answered the phone was the owner. I believe him and his son worked together there. He did not have an issue with the kit or anything like that, but because of the proven track record of the Journeys Off-Road kit, he did not feel that these spacers were necessary. However, for me, I would like to eliminate that vibration as much as possible, just to give me a little more peace of mind. But one thing that the man at Journeys did mention was that this bushing right here goes bad. Looking at mine, it's not looking too good. I don't know if you guys can see the stress fractures in there, but he did recommend replacing that bushing. And I asked him, what are your thoughts on this JXB Performance bushing? And he said that this is a highly recommended component, but it may in fact transfer even more vibration into the system, but it will prevent the differential from being damaged by a bad bushing. And so I may not install this right now. I want to get the drive shaft worked on, but 2 things I would definitely get, and in fact I would encourage JXB to sell this as a kit for the Journeys Off-Road lift kit, is the differential lift bolts or drop bolts and this carrier bushing. All right, so instead of talking all day, I'm gonna go ahead and remove. This is the rearmost carrier bearing bushing. I don't have anything supporting this, so I do have to be careful to make sure I don't drop the drive shaft directly onto my face, but let's get going. Just making sure I can hold the weight of that thing. The instructions for this install weren't that great, but I've got some bushings there. I've got some washers. So these bolts and washers do not come off, but there was a second washer that is on top of that. And so when I go to install these, I'm gonna use that washer on the bottom just to give me a good amount of purchase onto that bracket. And then I'm gonna feed this through like that. But before I can do that, let's go ahead and get this one removed. All right, one down. I've got a little bit of time to get my hands going, and if I can get it started, then I'll be good to let go. Oops. I've just got to not rush and not panic, and we'll be okay. Am I even getting started though? I think I am. Okay. All right, got some startage right there, and now I just got to get this one started. And then I can get my torque wrench and torque this down. And so you can't really tell, and I haven't installed the front part yet, but the angle between the rear part of the drive shaft and the central part is significantly reduced. And so just to do this the right way, I know I did the last one kind of the janky way. I'm gonna use this old jack stand that I've had for about 25 years to support this. In fact, I wanna get it as close as I can to the without interfering with my work. Go ahead and back this out. All right, good. Got my washer here. Onto my bolt. My bushing in. Let's see if I can get that bushing. If I can get that bushing started, then I can actually lower that jack stand a little bit without interfering. Almost there, I think. Let's see what we got. Not yet. 19, okay. 19. 19. Whoa, that rang like a bell. 19, all right, good to go. So one thing I can tell you, I don't have like a compass or anything, is that substantial angle that we saw towards the beginning has definitely been distributed across the entire drive shaft. All right guys, I've really got to correct this problem up front. It was 20 Newton meters, which equates to about 15 foot-pounds. So since I torqued mine down to 19 foot-pounds, I feel like that is at least acceptable to be just slightly over torqued, and therefore will not be a problem. But I need to get off of this dirt road and onto a paved road to really test and see if there is a difference in the drive shaft or the vibration in the van with those bushings installed. We're approaching the paved road. I really can't tell on the dirt road just because there's so much, so many imperfections in the road. But when I make this left-hand turn here in a second, I will know essentially immediately whether or not I've reduced the vibration from that Journeys off-road lift kit. And the reason a lot of folks need to consider this option is because some people do this lift kit and then they assume they need a new drive shaft or they need new CV axles. But I can tell you without a doubt, there is an improvement in the vibration by installing those spacers. So if you really want to get the best ride quality out of your Journeys off-road lift kit, highly recommend installing those spacers. I could feel it immediately. I'm cruising essentially at what I would call like the maximum gyration velocity that I was experiencing over the last month. I don't know if there's a little bit there, but it feels like it is entirely 100% gone. And so by eliminating that vibration, we're also eliminating potential additional friction in the U-joints that could prolong and save that drive shaft overall. Now let's get back to the shop and talk a little bit about the exact calculations that JXP did to make this kit work. I went back and I checked jxbperformance.com, and that kit was $150. I feel like that is a little steep for the 4 bushings and the 4 bolts. But what you're paying for there is the research and probably the tooling to make those precise bushings. Before the lift kit, I had an angle, the most extreme angle in the drivetrain there for the drive shaft was 1.7 degrees. By adding the lift kit, it increased to 7 degrees, and then adding these bushings back in decreased it back down to 3 degrees. So there is no exactly perfect solution bringing it back to the 1.7 degrees, but I've only increased from the stock angle by 1.3 degrees with those bushings versus the 5.3 degrees with the Journeys Off-Road 3.5-inch lift kit. So you might be wondering, would I do it again? Absolutely, yes. 150 I feel is a little steep. I don't want to complain too much because it did at least correct the problem from what I can feel. I can't feel that vibration anymore, and I wanted to do that carrier bearing separately because the theory there is when you add that carrier bearing reinforcement, it potentially puts some more of the vibration back into what you feel because it reinforces that bushing so well that the vibrations transfer from that arm, from that differential arm, into the chassis of the vehicle. So that being said, I will install that carrier bushing pretty soon. The rain has still held off. It hasn't hit me yet. But if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next adventure. But actually, the last thing I recommend before we go is save these nuts and bolts, because if you ever want to restore your van to factory ride height, maybe if you want to sell it down the road and you don't want to sell it with a lift kit, you will need these bolts to revert the drive shaft back to its OEM configuration.